Um, this month, the highlight of our program today is a presentation on the Bangkok consumers' perception towards CSR by Griffin of Bureau of Public Relations. Actually, Bureau of Public Relations conducted this survey just back in March. So this information is very current. They conducted this with BMRS. Andy Gao of BMRS was initially going to come, but sadly can't make it. And without further ado, I'll hand over to Brian.
Thank you. Okay. So we conducted a survey of 300 Bangkokians in March. And the reason we did it was we often, clients come to us and ask us for advice on implementing CSR programs. And we thought we'd get some real statistics on what people in Bangkok think about CSR programs, their perceptions of which companies they think are doing a good job, and which areas of the community, whether it's education or the environment, or helping the disadvantaged, they think is most important for corporate CSR programs. So Bureau of Public Relations, it's a full-service public relations agency. We have offices in Bangkok, Chicago, and Ho Chi Minh City, and we work for government, private industry, and we work for nonprofits as well. So we've seen a bit of a change in the way CSR is performed in Asia Pacific. Going back about 10 years when we started working in the region, it was primarily a small group of people with large voices. This would include NGOs, governments, primarily Western governments, groups of ethical investors, special interest groups, and elites, cronies heading philanthropies. There were some smaller voices too, but primarily these were the groups who were helping to define CSR. And so what we've seen is a transition to smaller groups of activists, passionate consumers, employees, community groups, local governments who now are driving a larger part of CSR. So it's gone from these small groups with loud voices to many people who now have a say in dialogue with governments and business. And what we think is driving this change is technology. Primarily the blogosphere and mobile technology. These channels are giving strength to new voices. It's bringing local communities together to have a bigger platform. I think one example that we're seeing locally, and I'm just citing this as an observer, is possibly with Tesco Lotus. We're seeing communities in different parts of Thailand who are rallying together and creating a platform of messages that allows them to challenge a company of Tesco Lotus size. And I don't have any other information aside from what I read in the newspaper, but I think that this is a fact. And so essentially what's happening is these small groups are banding together and forcing a dialogue with business in a way that we really haven't seen until the last couple of years. Okay, so this is a chart of how one way we think that problems go through mobile technology and become PR issues. So this is a rough scale, but on day one we see whistleblowers have a problem. And maybe they use a mobile phone to take a picture of something that's happening in a plant. Maybe it's long working hours or it's some other sort of labor-related issue. They go to local NGO. The local NGO posts a story online. Local journalists start to pick up the story, local blogs, international NGOs are linked to the local NGO. So the story is starting to gain momentum, okay? By day 6 or 7, the local blog posts are being translated into international blogs, websites, and international media. Now it's becoming a media story, and on day 8, it's a very bad day for the PR team. So this is the reason that we looked at individual Bangkokians to get their opinion on what they view as the most important points of CSR. So the survey again took place in March. It was done within Bangkok. We looked at 300 people, primarily white-collar workers, primarily people with college educations. And the reason we did this was because these are the people who have access to technology and who are web savvy and can use mobile devices. So they are, in a way, these people have their own printing presses, and they're able to communicate and, as a result, force dialogue with business. So this gives you a look at the demographics, and my partner, Andy, from BMRS Asia, is really the expert on the survey. He's a market researcher, and we joined together to do this, but you see there's a breakdown between ages. We want to know what different generations thought of CSR in Thailand. So basically, an even split between various ages, even split between male and female. However, it is primarily an educated group of people with 62% of people with college degrees. And again, you see here, 60% of the people we surveyed are white-collar workers. Okay, so again, people with access to computers and technology. This was an interesting survey result. I'm not sure the reason for this, but 98% of the people in Thailand, the 98% of people we surveyed, so Bangkokians, are aware of CSR as a concept. And we used a Thai term to define it. It's an extremely high rate. I don't know why that is. I can speculate. I think the media in Thailand covers CSR probably more than other nations. I know a similar survey in Canada showed that 65% of the population was aware of what CSR is. So these are average people. The average person on the street in Bangkok knows what CRS is, and they have opinions about it. So we asked them who has the most responsibility. Are consumers responsible, companies, or government? Government was the majority. 47% of people felt that government has the most responsibility for taking care of society, taking care of the community, with companies at 31%. People under age 30 place slightly more responsibility on consumers to take a role versus those over 30. We also wanted to find out which types of industries consumers felt had the most duty to have positive CSR programs. And here, industrial companies were in the lead, energy and petroleum, second place at 26%. We think that food may play a growing role in, and they may need to do more CSR programs given the way food prices are surging. Okay. This slide talks about consumers who believe companies should act in a responsible manner. So almost everybody believes that they should be acting responsibly. So that means companies should have CSR programs. 4 of 5 agree strongly that they should be doing this. 4 or 5 survey respondents. However, only 3 out of 4 agree that these companies currently do act in a responsible manner. Those over 30 tend to agree slightly more that companies do act responsibly. So it seems that the younger generation, people under 30 years of age, are a little bit more cynical about what companies are doing. In terms of rating their own employers, we asked survey respondents, say, what do you think of your company's own CSR programs? I think this is a good result. You look at over 30%, 32% of the people we surveyed felt that their companies were doing a good job. And 55% felt that they were doing an average job. I think that's a positive result for Thailand. That's a reflection on the leadership of the companies and what they're doing, not only in terms of their programs, but also communicating the programs back down to their employees. We also asked what people thought of companies in Thailand. Who's top of mind in terms of having a good CSR program? Chang clearly was the leader. They do a program where they distribute blankets in the north, I understand, during the winter. And for some reason, this really resonated with the survey respondents. And Chang, this was the nation picked up this part of the survey in their story. Chang was clearly the winner of this. There could be a number of factors. I think primarily they probably spend more money in communicating their CSR efforts. They have large budgets. Timing may also be a factor. We conducted the survey a little bit after the cold season, and I think Chang was doing a lot of work around this time to communicate what they're doing, but an interesting result nonetheless. And then we ask people the types of CSR they can recall from reading in the newspapers, watching TV, listening to the radio, or browsing online, talking to people. The number one active CSR was giving blankets to the poor in winter months. And this links back to Chong. So 29% of the people recalled this. 16% of the people recalled giving scholarships to young people. They couldn't link it to a specific company, but they were familiar with the concept of companies providing educational support for young people. And we think that this is probably the most important result from this survey, and we're going to use a Thai emphasis on education to help our clients build alliances and work with stakeholders in Thailand. So again, on education, 26% of people think that companies should be doing CSR acts, should be providing scholarships to young people. And if you factor in, at the end, funds to build schools in remote areas. So that brings the emphasis to education up to 31%. Environment comes in second. But again, we clearly see that Thai people want companies to help schools. And we think primarily universities, but there's a real emphasis on education. Again, we ask people of these various things: fair treatment of employees, support for the future of young people, meaning education, support for the environment, or support for the disadvantaged. In which one of these places would you want companies in Thailand to put the most resources? And again, support for the future of young. In other words, education came out on top at 36%. So we asked people, what types of CSR are you aware of, and which types impressed you the most? 13% of people were aware of education, and 27% were most impressed by this. So again, education came up again, and we really see this as a theme that ran throughout this entire survey as a place that we believe companies should be putting more resources. We also wanted to know where people are getting their information about CSR. Was it talking to friends, looking on the internet, reading newspapers? TV came out on top. This could come back to the Chong connection, the fact that Chong is using TVCs to promote blanket distribution programs. People are also aware of CSR through the newspapers, and we think newspapers are the best way to communicate ideas. So I think companies are putting a lot of resources into creating news. Interesting to note, magazines came out below or almost equivalent to internet stories. So more people are going to the internet for news about CSR, and we think just news in general. And then if you look at how people wanted to learn about CSR, TV came out on top with newspapers in second place. So for companies that are going to invest in communicating their good deeds, TV and newspapers are the best ways to go. This question we asked people: would you be willing to pay more for a product or service that you were guaranteed was 100% socially responsible? And 90% said they would. So I don't know whether or not that would correlate with the checkout line, but it's an interesting fact anyway. And so we see opportunities based on these results, and I think the key opportunity is for private industry to develop CSR programs with universities, particularly some of the major universities in Bangkok. One thing that we've been doing for the past couple of years is proposing that clients form academic alliances. And this involves scholarships, lectures, knowledge sharing, internships, and PR collaboration. So it's more than just writing a check to the university for a scholarship. We think that the private industry should bond with universities on a much deeper level and an ongoing level. And I really think the scholarship money comes in at the end. I think it's the time spent doing guest lectures, having internship programs, sharing knowledge, sharing technology. Those are the things that Thai universities want. And we've started developing these programs on behalf of our clients. And it gives clients, it gives private industry a great ally. Okay, so this, from the survey results, we think that this is really they point to a need or a desire among Thai people for greater collaboration between private industry and universities. And so as we start to think about this more and think about what are the benefits for companies who do form alliances with universities, and we see benefits on a number of levels. Human resources, there's a race for talent in Thailand. And by starting relationships, starting alliances with universities, while students are still in school, it gives companies a head start on human resources and finding the best employees. Universities are also great allies for support. When a private company is in trouble, they can turn to a university for support that is often viewed by the media as being objective. Universities are also helpful in generating press coverage. We think that these academic alliances should be covered by the media from the very beginning and then covered throughout the entire process, throughout the entire collaboration. Relationship building is also important. Universities have many influential people, and these can be a great asset for private industry as well. Government relations and client relations. We also recommend to some of our customers that they form these alliances with their clients. For example, a company in the aeronautical business that sells to other aeronautical businesses, we suggest they form alliances together with universities, maybe who also have aeronautical programs. So this holistic approach gives companies benefits on many levels, gives universities benefits on many levels, and also helps out private industry. So that's it. It's quick. Those are the results. Thank you. Yes.
I think you might find that some of the statistics that you've come up with will vary from country to country.
Yes.
So that they would be specific to Thailand.
Yes.
And that you will probably find, I think a figure of 4% was actually mentioned in terms of education for people with disabilities.
Yeah.
You will probably find that maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more. Yes. What has been overseas.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think the trend of CSR stakeholders going from this small group of people with powerful voices to just normal people who have access to technology, I think that throughout Asia Pacific is a trend that applies to every country. You're right. I think in Thailand there are opinions on CSR that are very, very much from Vietnam or other countries.
We had a speaker, I think it was 2 months ago, who had done part of a survey of several countries, and your survey agreed with his in that I think Thailand was rated 4th amongst all the countries internationally that they surveyed in terms of recognition and acknowledgement and having CSR policies. But then the other statistic is when it actually came to people or the company making a contribution to CSR, I think Thailand came last or close to last, is that everybody's recollection? Whereas your survey seems to show that people think Thailand is way up there. It certainly is totally at odds with the other study. Could you think of a reason why?
So I think I read a story about the other study in the newspaper, and that was comparing different countries. So we're asking just people on the street, consumers, most of them professionals, but just people, what they think of CSR. And so these are all just opinions based on Thailand, what's happening in Thailand. It's as if CSR in other places doesn't exist. So these are strictly Thai opinions on what's happening.
There, comment on that. There was another difference too. That survey was only for privately held businesses. Didn't include anything publicly held businesses. China, for example, should factor in the
You said about 99% of the people you asked said no about the term CSR.
Yes.
Is it just knowing the application or understanding the concept, or how do people?
It very basic details about the concept, what it means. Yeah, so it's 98%.
Actually, I think there's more recognition for the phrase CSR than there is for the whole, frankly.
I think that's possible, yeah. If there are questions on the actual survey, how it was conducted, I'm happy to talk to our survey partner. He couldn't be here today. But if there are questions about specifics, we would be happy to answer those.
But I wanted to be CSR is not so well understood yet, I think.
Yeah.
So basically it's this philanthropy.
Yep.
Wrong.
So even if the depth of understanding is not very deep, just the fact that they understand the term, they're 30% ahead of their county, according to these figures. Sure.
I think one of the reasons why we had that 98% of people knew about CSR is because very recently this year in Thailand, CSR has been booming like a fashion. If this survey was conducted last year, I'm sure the figures would be much, much lower. The government's been talking about it much, much more, and for the past 2 or 3 months, there have been hundreds of CSR fairs, CSR events organized everywhere. So everybody hears about it more and more, so they know of it. But often in those fairs, people come and they ask the organizers, so what does it mean to do CSR? I have a company, I like to do CSR, but what am I supposed to do to look like a good CSR company? So they know of it, but I'm not quite sure they know exactly what it means to do CSR all the way.
I agree. I think some people who even, worked in public relations don't fully, there's a big difference between writing a check and giving to charity and doing CSR, right? The CSR is an investment. If you look at some of the technology companies, for example, everything they do is about creating future customers. They're helping people at the same time. They're writing checks for closing a digital divide. But in 10 years, those people are going to be buying products that are probably going to be purchased from the companies that are funding the program. So I think that's where the disconnect is. There's awareness that companies need to do something good to balance out maybe some negative factors. But to look at it as more of a business investment or a business proposition, as Alex mentioned, is the next step.
I think to build on his point, I think what the points to actually probably correct is that nobody cited anything about labor relations or internal labor, which is definitely a corporate responsibility. So that's important. Nobody pointed to it, so it shows a limitation.
Yes. Yeah. I think the other factor is the media in Thailand does write about CSR quite a bit. There's some newspapers who have reporters that is part of their beat. They're supposed to cover the CSR beat. In other markets, some newspapers have a policy not to write about public relations, and sort of by fact, they don't write about CSR either. I think that's changing a little bit. But in Thailand, the journalists are very open-minded about writing about CSR. I think people understand CSR as a result. Public understands better.
I wonder if you could clarify something. Even though there seems to be so much of a buzz about CSR, in one of your early slides, you seem to suggest that CSR efforts in Thailand only happen if reactively. In other words, if somebody blows a whistle or somebody writes a blog. Are you suggesting that there's no proactive CSR in Thailand?
No, well, so the slide that talks about the whistleblower, it really just talks about the process. And basically we wanted to show that problems now are linked to, problems going public are linked to technology. And so the speed with which it happens is very quick. But I think there are many proactive CSR programs in Thailand. And I don't think people are necessarily just being reactive. But we, one big part of CSR is being able to mitigate problems that may arise in the future. And so we think that CSR can help stop some of those problems that start with the whistleblower.
I think you made an important point when you said the CSR is an investment.
Yeah.
I can remember going to the business conference, say, 12 years ago, where there was no developed concept of CSR. People thought about corporate philanthropy. And at that time, but the CEOs who really agonise at how they could justify corporate philanthropy that wasn't making the shareholder value. The other point with corporate philanthropy was the freedom to change the changes in CEOs, whether they were likely, probably more likely changes in CEO and why, what they were interested in. It's only when companies start to align their philanthropic or corporate social responsibility with their own interests that becomes sustainable. So in Shanghai, I think is a good example. That's in the alcohol business. In a company like Thailand, a lot of people around not very fond of the alcohol.
Yeah.
So it's those big alcohol groups, what's the legal company. But the Bankers program totally shows that they're very much engaged in the FDR interests. Can't be open negatives. Use this project.
And that's, we do a little bit of work for another alcohol company on an international basis. And so for an alcohol company, the problem's a little bit different because they can't encourage future consumers. You know, because that becomes a serious problem. So they are essentially writing checks to charity for responsible drinking and safe driving. So I think for alcohol companies, the situation is different than companies that, for example, sell technology can encourage future consumers. But I think alcohol companies also have the profit margins where they can afford to write these checks.
Your results showed great concern for helping education through scholarships, building schools, but I didn't see any link to universities. I mean, that certainly would be very motivating to companies to link with universities. There are a lot of benefits to that.
Yeah.
But I think the perception of Thai people is helping younger kids.
Well,
That's their concern.
yeah, I mean, I think the survey results showed that it was education, and we think that the best results for companies are going to come from linking at the university level, because universities can provide, I think, just as much support. You know, if a private company writes a check for some scholarships and comes in and gives talks, I think the universities can give back even more. You know, because they can provide third-party support. So often companies, they need somebody to help speak up on their behalf, because the public believes what somebody else says about you more than what you say about yourself. And so in a way, universities become great third-party supporters. So we push clients, we recommend that clients create relationships at the university level, because that's where the real benefits are.
For the company, what I'm saying is, from your research results, I don't see any link between concern for education support and universities.
Well, you're right. We didn't get into different levels of education. Right. I think you're saying you think most people prefer to see it at the young level. I think Thai people put education at a very high level, any kind of education. And I think if it's at the university level, I think it's better for the private industry, is what I'm saying. I think it's appreciated by Thais at all levels. Maybe it's appreciated more for younger students, but for private companies, there are not as many benefits in some cases.
But most of the CSR outreach programs I've seen performed by companies or institutions like I've seen go to the schools, rural areas.
Yeah, well, I think, the media also loves children, and there's a lot of warm feelings around children. It's a much warmer story than a story about linking up at a university level. But again, I think the benefits of linking at a university level are just so much greater for companies that's what you're after.
I was just going to say, at the university level, though, I don't know how much you're looking at what's going on overseas, but the universities certainly feel that all their researchers should have academic freedom, and you're seeming to imply that if a company links up with the university, that somehow they fault that university, when in fact, if the researchers have full academic freedom, they could just as likely be some of the people to blow the whistle on a corporate. So I'm not sure that there isn't a double-edged sword to that.
Well, but at least there's dialogue. At least they understand where you're coming from, and you're not this unknown evil enterprise. choices there if you need it, if you think it's going to be beneficial. I think it's a good way for private industry to get to know people.
Do you think your results would have been different if you asked a different sample group, meaning groups that were not so educated? You're a normal rural person, maybe they would have linked corporate social responsibility to maybe job security or something else that's not education. Do you think that's a possibility?
I do. So the next survey we're going to do, we're going to start looking at different parts of the country. And we'll have something compared to that. Yeah, I think you're right.
All right, good. Any more questions? Last question? If not, I want to thank you myself, and I'd like everybody else to join me in thanking Brian for his great talk today.